The wind off Lake Michigan had no mercy on a Tuesday afternoon, and Jessica Carter felt every sharp bite of it as she hurried down Michigan Avenue with her phone pressed hard against her ear and a paper bag of forgotten lunch swinging from her wrist. "Pete, I already told you," she said, weaving between tourists who moved at a speed that made her want to scream. "I will figure out the tuition. I just need 2 more weeks." Her brother's voice crackled through the phone, guilty and low. "Jess, I hate that you keep doing this for me. Maybe I should just take a gap semester and work." "You are not taking a gap semester," she said firmly, dodging a man in a business suit who stepped out of a building without looking. "You are graduating in May. That is not a negotiable conversation." She had been having this conversation with Pete for 3 months now. Ever since their grandmother Donna had fallen and fractured her hip, the medical bills had quietly swallowed the small cushion of savings Jessica had built up working double shifts at Rosie's Diner on West Jackson. She was not complaining. She had never been the type to complain. But she was tired, and the cold was cutting through her thin jacket in a way that made everything feel slightly harder than it needed to be. "I love you," she told Pete. "Stop worrying. Just go to class." She hung up and exhaled a long breath that turned to mist in the air. The light at the corner changed, and she stepped off the curb with the crowd, her eyes dropping to her phone as she typed a quick message to Brenda, asking if the lunch. Rush had slowed down yet. She did not see him coming. She heard the crowd first. A sudden ripple of noise off to her left, the click and whir of cameras firing in rapid succession, voices shouting a name she did not immediately register. Then she felt a hand, large and certain, close around her arm and pull her sideways with a gentleness that contradicted its urgency. She looked up. The man was tall. That was the first thing she registered because she had to tilt her head back to see his face properly. He had dark brown hair, the kind that looked expensive without trying, and a jaw that seemed carved rather than grown. His eyes were a shade of gray that she had no category for, somewhere between storm clouds and winter lake water, and they were looking at her with an intensity that made her forget for one full second that she did not know this person at all. "I am so sorry," he said, and then he kissed her. It was not a peck. It was not a shy or tentative thing. It was a kiss that arrived with full confidence, his hand coming up to cup the side of her face, his head tilting just slightly. And the world around Jessica Carter simply stopped existing. The cameras kept clicking. The crowd kept moving. Somewhere behind her, someone called out a question. But all Jessica could process was the warmth of his mouth against hers, the faint smell of cedar and something clean and expensive, and the entirely unreasonable feeling that she had been waiting for this exact moment without knowing it. It lasted for seconds, maybe 5. When he pulled back, his eyes searched her face immediately, watching for her reaction with an expression that was equal parts guilt and something softer that he seemed to be working hard to control. "I am genuinely sorry," he said again, quieter this time, meant only for her. "The photographers have been following me for 3 blocks. I panicked. That was not acceptable behavior, and I know it." Jessica blinked. Her hand was still loosely gripping the strap of her bag. Her phone had somehow stayed in her other hand. She became aware again of the noise around them, of the cameras still pointed in their direction, of people on the sidewalk whispering and pulling out their own phones. "Did you just—" she started. "Yes," he said. "I did, and I am sorry." She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at the cluster of photographers now being held back by 2 large men in dark coats, what appeared seemingly from nowhere. Then she looked back at the man in front of her. "You have security," she said. "I do. And you kissed a stranger instead of just walking faster." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. It seemed like a reasonable solution at the time. In hindsight, it clearly was not. Jessica became aware that her heart was beating much faster than a person standing still on a public sidewalk had any reason for. She also became aware, in the way that sometimes takes a delayed moment to land, that she recognized this face. Not personally. From newspapers. From the cover of a business magazine that Brenda had left in the break room 2 months ago with a headline that read something about the future of American technology. "Or Ethan Harlow," she said. "I am," he said. And you are? Someone who is going to be very late getting back to work, she replied. A corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. And it changed his entire face in a way that was frankly inconvenient for Jessica's ability to stay irritated with him. Let me make it up to you, he said. There is a coffee shop half a block from here. 15 minutes. I will explain myself properly, and then you can leave and never think about this again if you choose. I have a job to get back to. I know. 15 minutes. He paused. Please. The please did something to her that the kiss had started. It was too genuine to dismiss. Rich men did not usually say please like they meant it, and something in the way he said it made her believe that this one did. She told herself it was the cold. She told herself she just wanted to warm up for a few minutes before walking the 6 blocks back to the diner. She told herself a lot of things as she followed Ethan Harlow into a coffee shop, called the press room, and took a seat across from him. At a small table near the window, he ordered 2 coffees without asking her preference, then immediately corrected himself. Actually, what do you want? I should have asked. Black coffee is fine, she said. He told the server black coffee for both of them. And then he folded his hands on the table and looked at her with the kind of direct attention that most people never practiced. My name is Ethan Harlow, he said. I am 34 years old. I run a technology company called Harlow Systems. I grew up in Detroit with very little money, and I have spent the last 12 years building something I am proud of. And apparently, I have also spent the last 6 months becoming someone. That press photographer is chased down the street because the internet decided my personal life is more interesting than my work. Wrapped both hands around the warm coffee cup that arrived in front of her. Why were they following you today specifically? There is a rumor circulating that I am engaged, he said flatly. I am not. But correcting a rumor is apparently less interesting than letting it run. So they chase me hoping for a photograph that confirms something that does not exist. And kissing a random woman on the street helps that how? It does not, he admitted. It was impulsive. I am not generally an impulsive person. He studied her for a moment. You are not going to tell me your name, Jessica, she said. Jessica Carter. I am a waitress. I grew up in Evanston. I do not have a rumored engagement, and nobody chases me down the street. That sounds peaceful, he said, and he meant it. She looked at him carefully. There was something about Ethan Harlow that did not match the version of him she had. Half absorbed from magazine covers and overheard conversations. He was not performing. He was not working the room or managing her impression of him. He was just sitting across from her in a coffee shop, slightly uncomfortable, genuinely apologetic, and looking at her like she was an interesting problem he had not expected to encounter today. It is peaceful, she said, and busy, and mine. He nodded slowly. I will not bother you again after this. But I want you to know that what I did was wrong, and I am sorry. You deserved better than being pulled into someone else's problem without warning. Jessica took a long sip of coffee. Outside the window, the photographers had dispersed. Michigan Avenue moved along at its usual indifferent pace, full of people living their separate Tuesday afternoons with no knowledge of the strange small thing that had just happened inside this coffee shop. The kiss was not terrible, she said, and then immediately wanted to take it back because she could not believe. Those words had left her mouth out loud. Ethan Harlow looked at her. Something shifted in his gray eyes, something she could not name, but felt the weight of clearly.
Oh, he said quietly.
It was not. She stood up, pulled her jacket back on, and picked up her bag. I have to go back to work, of course. We stood too, which she had not expected. She was almost to the door when she heard him say her name. She turned around. Jessica Carter, he said, standing beside that small table with his coffee growing cold. Looking like a man who was about to say something he had not planned to say. Is it all right if I know where you work? Not for any reason that should worry you. He stopped. She should have said no. She knew she should have said no. But something about the way he stopped himself, the way he caught the sentence, and held it back like he was being careful with it, made her answer before she had fully decided to. Rosie's Diner, she said. West Jackson. We open at 6, She pushed through the door and walked back out into the cold Chicago afternoon. And she did not look back, but she felt his eyes on her all the way to the corner. And her heart did not slow down for the rest of the day. Brenda was waiting at the service counter when Jessica walked back into the diner, apron already untied and lunch rush clearly winding down. "You are 12 minutes late," Brenda said. "And your face looks weird." "What happened to your face?" "Nothing happened to my face," Jessica said, tying her apron. "Your face looks like something happened to it. Can you please just tell me if table 4 needs refills?" Brenda stared at her for 3 more seconds with the focused suspicion of someone who had known Jessica Carter for 4 years and could read her like a menu she had memorized. Then she handed her the coffee pot and said nothing, which was somehow worse. That night, sitting on the edge of her bed in the small apartment she shared with nobody because Pete lived in the dorms and Donna lived in the house they had grown up in, Jessica opened her sketchbook. She did this most nights. It was where she kept the designs she never showed anyone. Logos and layouts and color studies that lived in the margins of a life she had not quite figured out how to reach yet. She tried to sketch, but her pencil kept stopping. She kept thinking about gray eyes and a quiet voice saying her name like it was something worth saying carefully. She closed the sketchbook and turned off the light and told herself very firmly that Ethan Harlow was not going to walk into Rosie's diner on West Jackson. Men like that did not walk into places like that. She was wrong. He came in on a Thursday. Jessica was refilling the sugar dispensers at the counter when the bell above the door announced someone new. And she did not look up immediately because the bell announced someone new approximately every 4 minutes during the morning rush, and she had learned long ago to let her peripheral vision do the first check before committing her full attention to anything. But Brenda made a sound beside her. A very specific sound, somewhere between a gasp and a swallowed word. That made Jessica look up immediately. Ethan Harlow was standing inside the door of Rosie's diner on West Jackson, wearing a dark coat that cost more than the diner's monthly electric bill, looking around the room with the calm and unhurried expression of a man who had decided to be somewhere and was entirely comfortable with that decision. His eyes found Jessica. Before she could look back down, she set the sugar dispenser on the counter with more force than she intended. "That is him," Brenda whispered. Not whispering at all. "That is the man from the news. That is Ethan Harlow." "Jessica, why is Ethan Harlow standing in our diner looking directly at you like you are the only person in this room?" "Go check on table 7, Jessica said. "Table 7 has full coffees and no needs whatsoever." "Brenda." "I am going." "I am going." Brenda picked up a coffee pot she absolutely did not need and moved away with the slow reluctance of someone determined to watch everything from a slight distance. Jessica crossed the diner and stopped in front of Ethan with her order pad in hand and her expression set to the pleasant and professional version of herself that she wore like a uniform. "Good morning," she said. "Sit anywhere you like. I will be right with you." "Good morning, Jessica," he said. The way he said her name had the same quality it had in the coffee shop 2 days ago. Deliberate and careful, like he had thought about how to say it before he arrived. It was deeply annoying. She led him to a booth by the window without being asked, left a menu she was fairly sure he would not need, and gave herself exactly 30 seconds at the coffee station to collect herself before walking back. "What can I get you?" she said. "Whatever you think is good here," he said, not opening the menu. "Everything on this menu is good." "That is not a helpful answer." He looked up at her. "What do you eat when you sit down here?" The question surprised her because it assumed she sat down, which she almost never did. "The egg sandwich on wheat," she said. "With hot sauce?" "I will have that," he said. "And black coffee." Wrote it down even though she did not need to, and walked back to the counter and clipped the ticket to the order wheel and turned to find Brenda standing approximately 8 inches behind her. "He ordered what you recommended," Brenda said. "People do that." Jessica Carter. "That man did not come to this diner for an egg sandwich." "Brenda, I am begging you." She brought Ethan his coffee and his food, and she did not linger, and she did not make conversation. And she was courteous and efficient and completely determined to treat him like every other customer who sat in her section on a Thursday morning. He left a tip that made her stand very still at the table for a moment after he walked out. He came back on Saturday, then Tuesday. By the following Friday, he had been in 4 times, and Rosie herself, who was 71 years old and had owned the diner since before Jessica was born, had started calling him the regular in the good coat, which was somehow both accurate and deeply unhelpful. He always sat in Jessica's section. He always ordered something she suggested. He always left a tip that she consistently told herself she was going to give back to him, and consistently did not. And every single visit, without pressure or agenda, he stayed a little longer, and they talked a little more. She learned things about him, the way you learn things about someone in a diner, in small pieces between refills and other tables, in sentences that had to be compact because time was always limited. She learned that he had grown up in a 2-bedroom house in Detroit with his mother and 2 younger sisters, that his mother had worked 2 jobs for most of his childhood, that he had taught himself to code at 14 using library computers because they could not afford a home machine. She learned that he had started his first company at 22 with $8,000 he had saved over 3 years of working nights, that he had slept in his office for the first 2 years because paying rent on both an apartment and a workspace was not possible. She learned that he did not like loud restaurants, that he read 3 newspapers a day in physical print, and that he had never in his adult life taken a vacation longer than 4 days because he did not know how to make himself stop. She told him things too, which surprised her because she was not generally a person who told people things easily. She told him about Pete and the tuition situation, not in a complaining way, just as information, the way you share your life when someone is genuinely listening. She told him about Donna and the hip fracture and the way her grandmother still tried to get up and cook breakfast every morning despite being under strict orders not to. She told him about growing up sharing a bedroom with a woman who kept the light on late and read romance novels, and told Jessica regularly that the most important thing a person could do was feel things deeply and without apology. She did not tell him about the sketchbook. That felt like too much, like showing someone a room in your house that you had not finished yet. On the 5th visit, he arrived later than usual after the lunch rush had thinned, and the diner was quiet enough that she could sit down across from him for 12 minutes without anyone needing her urgently. She did not plan to sit. She was wiping down the neighboring table, and he asked her a question about something she had mentioned the week before, about a neighborhood art fair she had helped organize 3 years ago, and she answered, and somehow she was sitting. "You designed the promotional materials for it," he said. "You mentioned that." "I made some flyers," she said. It was not a big deal. He described a full visual identity, color palette, typography, layout system. "That is not making flyers." She looked at him. "You know what a layout system is? I run a technology company. Half of what we do lives in how it looks. I know what design thinking is." He held her gaze. "Are you still doing it?" She thought about the sketchbook on her nightstand, the pages that were getting fuller. "Sometimes, when I have time." "What does that mean for you? Sometimes when you have time?" It was the specificity of the question that got her. Not a polite follow-up, but a real one, the kind that wanted an actual answer. "It means late at night mostly," she said. "After everything else is done, I have this sketchbook. Branding concepts mostly. Like, I will see a small business in the neighborhood and think about what their visual identity could be if they had one. I draw it out. Logos, color stories, signage, stuff that will probably never exist anywhere except the notebook." Ethan was quiet for a moment in the way she had started to recognize as him, thinking rather than him being done. "Can I see it sometime?" He said no, she said immediately, and then felt slightly rude. "Not yet. It is personal." "Understood," he said, and dropped it completely, which made her want to show him immediately, which was exactly the kind of logic that made no sense and was becoming a regular feature of her interactions with this man. She went back to work and he finished his coffee and left. And she found herself replaying the conversation while she restocked the condiment station, which was something she needed to stop doing. That night she opened the sketchbook and looked at it differently than she usually did. She tried to see it the way someone else might see it. Someone who understood design as a professional language rather than a private habit. She looked at the branding concept she had developed over several weeks for a fictional bookshop she had named Paperthin. The deep green and warm gold color palette, the hand-drawn logo with its open book and trailing thread, the mock-ups for paper bags and window signage she had sketched in careful detail. It was good. She knew it was good the way you sometimes know a true thing about yourself that you have not said out loud. She closed the sketchbook and went to sleep. She did not know that the following week, while she was working a double shift on Wednesday, Ethan Harlow sat in a meeting with Oliver Kane, his business partner and the closest thing he had to a best friend, and said very little about the quarterly projections being discussed, and a great deal in his own head about a woman in a diner apron who drew brand identities in a sketchbook at midnight. Oliver noticed. Oliver always noticed. "You have been distracted for 2 weeks," Oliver said after the meeting cleared, "which for you is extraordinary, because you are the least distractible person I have ever worked with." "I am fine," Ethan said. "You approved a budget line item without reading it today. I watched you do it." Ethan said nothing. Oliver sat back in his chair with the expression of a man who had known Ethan Harlow for 11 years and was preparing to say something that would not be well received. "Is this about the woman from the Michigan Avenue photographs?" Ethan picked up a pen. "The photographs were a misunderstanding. The photographs were everywhere. And you look at your phone more than you used to, which is saying something because you already looked at it constantly."
Oliver paused.
"She must be remarkable." Ethan set the pen down. "She is," he said simply. Oliver studied him for a moment. "Be careful," he said finally. "Not with her. With yourself. You have a tendency to solve things for people when what they actually want is to solve things themselves." It was a fair thing to say. Ethan knew it was fair because it was accurate. He had always approached problems, personal and professional, by finding the most efficient path to resolution and taking it. It was how he had built everything he had. But Oliver was right that it was not always what people needed. And Jessica Carter was not a problem to be solved. He thought about that for a long time, which is why, when he heard through a connection in the design industry about an open portfolio review being held by one of Chicago's most respected branding agencies, a real opportunity for emerging designers to get professional eyes on their work with no application fee and no prerequisite credentials required. He did not call Jessica. He did not mention it the next time he came into the diner. What he did was leave an envelope under his coffee cup on a Friday morning, addressed to Jessica in his handwriting, with the details of the portfolio review inside and a single sentence beneath them. The sentence said, "You should not keep that. Sketchbook only for yourself." There was no signature. He had thought about signing it and decided against it because this was not supposed to be about him. It was supposed to be about her. Brenda found the envelope first. Naturally, because Brenda found everything first. And she stood at the counter reading the card inside with huge eyes while Jessica was in the back refreshing her ponytail. "Tch," Brenda said when she came back out. "What?" "Sit down." "I do not have time to sit down." Jessica Renee Carter. "Sit down right now." She sat down. Brenda handed her the envelope. Jessica read the card twice. Then she sat very still and looked out the window at West Jackson Avenue, where the late morning traffic was doing what it always did, and she felt something move in her chest that was large and warm and slightly terrifying. She wanted to be annoyed. She had carefully maintained the right to be annoyed with Ethan Harlow for several weeks now, because annoyance was a manageable feeling, and what she was currently experiencing was not. He had not signed it. He had not made it about himself. He had not offered to help, or to accompany her, or to use any of his considerable connections to smooth the path. He had just left her a piece of information in a single sentence that said he saw something in her that she had been afraid to let herself fully see. "Are you going to go?" Brenda asked. Jessica folded the card and put it back in the envelope. "Yes," she said. "Good." Brenda picked up her coffee pot. And when you see him next, maybe stop pretending you are not completely gone on this man. It is exhausting to watch. I am not completely gone on him, honey, Brenda said, already walking away. You memorize what he orders, and you never memorize orders. You have been memorizing orders for 4 years, and the only person whose order lives in your head is his. Jessica sat with that for a moment. Then she picked up the envelope and went back to work. And that night, she sat at her small kitchen table and photographed every page of her sketchbook with her phone, carefully and methodically, and began selecting which ones to bring to the portfolio review. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. She thought about a man who had kissed her on a sidewalk without warning and then shown up in her diner and ordered her recommendation every single time, who had listened to her talk about her grandmother and her brother in a neighborhood art fair like those were the most important subjects in the world. She thought about gray eyes and a voice that said her name carefully. She thought about Oliver Kane's warning, which she did not know had been given, but which she would have recognized if she had, because she was already having a version of it with herself. Be careful, she thought. Not with him. With yourself. But even as she thought it, she knew that the careful version of this thing had already passed. Somewhere between the 5th coffee refill and the conversation about the art fair and the unsigned card under a coffee cup, Jessica Carter had stopped being careful, and for the first time in a very long time. She was not entirely sure she minded. The portfolio review changed everything. Jessica walked into the branding agency on a Monday morning, with her sketchbook under her arm and the kind of nerves that live in your stomach and refuse to be reasoned with. And she walked out 2 hours later with a business card from the creative director, a request to send digital files of 3 specific concepts, and the strange floating sensation of someone who has just been told that the thing they believed about themselves in private is actually true in public. The creative director, a sharp and warm woman named Patricia Holt, had spent 11 minutes on the paper-thin bookshop concept alone. She had asked questions about the design decisions, about the color theory behind the green and gold palette, about why Jessica had chosen a hand-drawn element for the logo rather than a clean geometric shape. Jessica had answered every question with a clarity that surprised even herself, because she had thought about these things deeply and privately for so long that the answers were simply there, ready and organized, waiting for someone to finally ask. You have a genuine voice, Patricia had said. That is the thing you cannot teach. Everything else is learnable. Jessica called Brenda from the sidewalk outside. I need you to scream quietly, she said when Brenda picked up. Brenda screamed quietly for approximately 4 seconds. Tell me everything. She told her everything. She walked 12 blocks without noticing because she was talking, and the talking was carrying her. And by the time she got home, she had also called Donna, who cried a little and then told her she had always known, and Pete, who said he was going to frame a copy of her sketchbook somehow, which did not make logistical sense, but was deeply appreciated. She did not call Ethan. She thought about it. She picked up her phone twice with the intention of calling him, and both times she set it back down. Not because she did not want to talk to him, but because she wanted to figure out exactly what she wanted to say before she said it. He had done something for her that she had not asked for and could not easily categorize. It was not charity. It was not interference. It was the specific act of someone who had paid enough attention to see what she needed, and then stepped back completely and let her walk toward it herself. She needed to tell him that in the right words. He came into the diner on Wednesday morning. Same time as always, same booth by the window. And when Jessica brought his coffee, he looked at her face, and something shifted in his expression immediately. Something happened, he said. The portfolio review, she said, setting the coffee down and sliding into the seat across from him because there were only 2 other tables occupied, and Brenda was covering them with a look on her face that said she would cover them indefinitely if necessary. Ethan was very still. And she told him. She told him about Patricia Holt and the 11 minutes on paper thin and the business card and the request for digital files. She told him about the walk home and the calls to Donna and Pete, She talked for a while, and he listened in the way she had come to understand. It was his specific and complete kind of listening, where his full attention gathered itself and settled on you like a warm and steady light. When she finished, he said nothing for a moment. "You did that," he said then. "I left a card with an address. You did everything else." "You saw me," she said quietly. "Before I could fully see myself, that matters." Something moved across his face that he did not try to control or put away. "You were always easy to see, Jessica." She looked at him across the small diner table with the morning light coming through the window and the sound of the city doing its regular work outside, and she thought that this was the moment she had been circling for weeks. The one where she either stayed safely on the edge of this thing, or she stepped fully into it. "I want to show you the sketchbook," she said. "The real version, in person." His expression was careful and warm at the same time. "I would like that very much." They made a plan for Saturday evening. He would come to her apartment. She would cook because she wanted to be on her own ground for this. And she would show him the sketchbook. And they would figure out together what this thing between them was. Supposed to be called She Spent Thursday and Friday? In a state of productive anxiety that she channeled into cleaning her apartment and cooking. A test version of her grandmother, Donna's chicken and rice recipe, to make sure she remembered all the steps correctly. Pete called on Friday night, and she could hear him grinning through the phone. "You really like him?" he said. "I am not having this conversation with my 19-year-old brother."
You do?
"You really do?" "Jess, that is amazing. Goodbye, Pete. Tell Donna she will have opinions about what to wear." She hung up and called Donna, who absolutely had opinions about what to wear. Saturday arrived the way important days always do, slightly faster than expected, and with a quality of light that feels different from regular light. Though that might only be visible to the person for whom the day is important, Jessica was pulling plates from the cabinet. At 6:30, when her phone rang, she did not recognize the number but answered, because she sometimes got calls about catering, queries for the diner on Rosie's behalf. The voice on the other end was female, smooth and unhurried in the manner of someone accustomed to having other people wait for them. "Is this Jessica Carter?" the voice said. "It is? Who is this?" "My name is Serena Wolf," the voice said. "I think we should talk about Ethan." Jessica set the plate down carefully. She knew the name. Brenda had mentioned it once, offhandedly, during one of her comprehensive briefings on Ethan Harlow's public life.
Ex-girlfriend? 2 years?
Ended several months ago. "What about Ethan?" Jessica said. "I want to be kind about this because I think you seem like a genuine person," Serena said, and her tone carried the specific warmth of someone who had rehearsed warmth. "But I have known Ethan for a long time, and I know how he operates. His company has been dealing with a public perception problem for months. The press has been painting him as cold and inaccessible, and that hurts his brand with consumers. His PR team has been looking for ways to soften his image." Jessica said nothing. "The photographs of the two of you on Michigan Avenue were very effective," Serena continued. "Warm, spontaneous, romantic. His approval ratings with general consumers went up 6 points after they ran. I just think you deserve to know what you are actually part of." The line went quiet. "I appreciate the call," Jessica said, and hung up. She stood in her kitchen for a long moment. The chicken was simmering on the stove. The sketchbook was on the coffee table where she had placed it earlier. Her apartment smelled like Donna's recipe and the candle she had lit by the window, and everything that had felt warm and full 20 minutes ago now had a cold question sitting in the middle of it. She thought about the photographs. She thought about the way Ethan had pulled her close that first day, deliberate and sudden. She thought about how quickly the images had spread, how many times she had seen them referenced in the weeks following. She thought about the way he had come to the diner, repeatedly, visibly, in a place where people recognized him and had phones. She thought about all of it, and she felt sick. When Ethan knocked on her door at 7, she opened it and looked at his face and hated how much she wanted what she had wanted an hour ago. "Something is wrong," he said immediately. "Come in," she said. She told him what Serena had said. She told him plainly and without drama because she was too tired for drama, and she deserved a plain answer. She stood in her own kitchen with her hands wrapped around a glass of water, and she watched his face while she talked. He did not interrupt. He did not look away. And when she finished, his expression was not defensive or calculating. It was something she had not expected. It was pain. "She called you," he said. He was quiet for a moment. "The photographs were an accident. I told you that, and it was true. What happened between us on that sidewalk was real and unplanned, and you know that because you were there." "I know what I felt," Jessica said carefully. "I do not always know other people's reasons." "My reasons," he said, and his voice was very quiet. "Been sitting in a booth by your window every week for a month, because that is where you are. My reasons have been learning how you take your coffee and what you think about at night and why you draw logos for businesses that do not exist yet because you have not let yourself believe that they could. My reasons have nothing to do with a public perception problem." He stopped. "I am sorry that she called you. I am sorry that you had to spend 1 minute wondering whether any of this was real." Jessica looked at him. "Why does she still have access to your number?" "To mine? I do not know how she got yours. I will find out." His jaw was tight. "Serena has her own reasons for doing what she just did, and they are not about protecting you." Jessica set her glass down. "I know that," she said. I knew it while she was talking. But knowing something is, motivated by someone else's agenda, does not make the question disappear. "What is the question?" he said. "Whether a man who has everything he could ever need actually wants what I have to offer, which is a waitress job and a sketchbook, full of dreams and a grandmother with a fractured hip and a brother whose tuition I am still figuring out." Ethan crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and stopped directly in front of her. He did not touch her. He let her see his face at close range, which was its own kind of honesty. "I grew up with nothing," he said. "I know the difference between people who are real and people who are performing. You are the most real person I have sat across from in 10 years. The job and the sketchbook and your grandmother and your brother are not things I am tolerating to get to some other version of you. They are you." He held her gaze. "And I have been gone on you since you told me a coffee shop kiss was not terrible, and then walked away before I could think of anything intelligent, too." Say Jessica felt the cold question in the middle of her warm kitchen begin to dissolve, but she was also Jessica Carter, who had learned early that the people you loved required protecting and that hope required evidence before it became trust. So she said the true thing. "I need you to understand that I cannot be a soft story for your brand," she said. "I cannot be the waitress who humanizes the billionaire. If that is any part of this, I need to know now, before I am any further in." "It is not," he said. "Ethan, it is not," he said again, steadily. "And I will spend however long it takes showing you that." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she exhaled. "The chicken is going to be overcooked," she said, something released in his expression. "I do not mind overcooked chicken." "I mind," she said. "Sit down." He sat at her small kitchen table, and she turned back to the stove, and they spent the next 40 minutes in the particular quiet of 2 people who have said the hard things and come through them and are now simply existing in the same space, which is its own kind of relief. She served the chicken and rice, and he ate it with the genuine appreciation of someone who was not being polite. He asked about Donna's original recipe, and she told him about her grandmother's kitchen and the specific afternoon light that came through the window there and how the smell of that recipe made her feel like a child in the safest possible way. After dinner, she brought the sketchbook to the table. She did not hand it to him. She opened it herself and turned the pages herself and talked about each one the way she had talked to Patricia Holt, but more personally, with the context of when she had drawn it and what she'd been thinking and what she had been trying to figure out. He listened and looked and asked questions that showed he understood not just what he was seeing, but why it mattered. When she got to the paper-thin pages, he was quiet for a long time. "This is a complete world," he said finally. "You built an entire world for a business that does not exist." "I do that a lot," she said. "Should do it for businesses that do exist," he said. And I do not mean that as an offer. I mean it as a fact. She closed the sketchbook. Outside her window, Chicago was doing what it always did at 9 on a Saturday night. Alive and lit and entirely indifferent to the small, significant things happening inside people's apartments. Serena is going to talk, Jessica said. Whatever story she has, she is going to put it somewhere public. Probably, Ethan said. And people are going to have opinions about this. About us, they will. Does that bother you? He looked at her directly. The only opinion I am interested in is yours. She nodded slowly. Mine is that you should have asked before kissing me on that sidewalk. You are absolutely right, he said. I should have. But, she said, and she felt the smile before it fully arrived. I am glad you did not. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, which was a small gesture and a large one at the same time. She turned her hand over, and their fingers settled together in the easy way of things that are finding their natural position. 3 days later, Serena Wolf published a long post on a popular gossip platform detailing her theory that Ethan Harlow was using a, quote, working-class woman to rehabilitate his corporate image. The post included screenshots of the Michigan Avenue photographs and several pointed observations about the difference between Jessica's world and Ethan's. It spread quickly. These things always did. Jessica saw it Tuesday morning before her shift, sitting on the edge of her bed with her phone and a cup of coffee. She read it twice. She felt the sting of it, the particular cold of being described in the third person by someone who had never met you, of having your life measured against someone else's and found decorative rather than real. She put her phone in her bag and went to work. Ethan called at 10. She let it go to voicemail because she was carrying 4 plates and had 2 tables waiting. She listened to the voicemail on her break. His voice was calm but tight in the way she now recognized meant he was working to stay calm. I know you have seen it, he said. I am handling it. I wanted you to hear from me before you saw what I am doing. I should have asked you first, and I am sorry I did not have time to.
A pause.
Watch the 11 o'clock news if you can. And Jessica, I am sorry you were in the middle of this. You did not ask for any of it. She did not have access to the 11 o'clock news during her shift, but Brenda did, on her phone. And Brenda found her in the break room at 11:15 with an expression that could only be described as overwhelmed. You need to watch this, Brenda said. Handing over the phone, it was a clip from a press conference. Ethan was standing at a podium in what looked like a conference room at Harlow Systems, and there were reporters and cameras arranged in front of him. And he looked like the version of himself that Jessica had seen in the portfolio review envelope and on magazine covers, composed and certain and built for public viewing. But what he said was not a prepared corporate statement. He talked about growing up in Detroit. He talked about his mother working 2 jobs. He talked about the difference between the life he had built and the life he had come from. And he talked about how easy it was to forget in the middle of building an empire, that the things which had made you who you were still mattered. Then he said her name. Jessica Carter is a designer, he said clearly and without qualification. She works at a diner on West Jackson because that is what her life has required of her, and she has met that requirement with more grace and consistency than most people I have encountered in boardrooms. She has a sketchbook full of work that deserves to be seen. She has a family she has held together with her own hands. She is not a story I am using. She is a person I am trying to deserve. He paused. And I thought the least I could do, given that her name is now being used in ways she never agreed to, was make sure that the true version of who she is was also on the record. The clip ended.
Jessica
Sat in the break room of Rosie's diner with Brenda's phone in her hand and her eyes stinging in a way she was going to blame on the recycled air, said, You are a designer. Brenda said softly, I know, Jessica said. Out on the news. In front of cameras? He said, You are a designer. Brenda, I am just noting what he said. Jessica handed the phone back and pressed the heels of her hands briefly against her eyes. She thought about a man who had grown up with nothing and built everything and was now standing in front of cameras not to protect his brand but to put her name on record as something real, she thought. about what Oliver Kane might have said, that Ethan had a tendency to solve things. But this had not been solving. This had been witnessing. There was a difference. She texted him one sentence during her last break of the day. The text said, "You called me a designer?" His response came in under a minute. "Because you are one." She stared at that for a long time. Then she typed, "Dinner tonight. My place again. I will not overcook the chicken this time." His response, "I will bring the wine." She pocketed her phone and went back out to her tables and finished her shift with the particular lightness of someone who has made a decision they are not afraid of. That evening, sitting across from Ethan at her small kitchen table with properly cooked chicken and a decent bottle of white wine between them, Jessica opened her laptop and showed him the email she had drafted to Patricia Holt, attaching 3 of her strongest sketchbook concepts in digital form. "I was going to send it this weekend," she said, "but I think I should send it now." "I think so too," he said. She hit send, then she closed the laptop and picked up her wine glass and looked at this man who had kissed her on a sidewalk 6 weeks ago out of panic and then showed up in her diner and sat in her section and listened to her talk and left an unsigned card under a coffee cup and said her name on television and was now sitting in her kitchen, looking at her like she was the most interesting thing he had encountered in all his years of encountering things. "I am not easy," she said. "I have a lot going on, and I am stubborn, and I do not ask for help. Well, and I will absolutely call you out when you try to fix things without asking." "I know," he said. "I am counting on it." "And I am not going to disappear into your world," she said. "I am going to stay in mine, and you can visit, and I will visit yours, and we will figure out what the middle looks like." "That sounds exactly right," he said. She looked at him. "Okay," she said simply. He smiled then, the real one, the one that changed his whole face. "Okay," he said back, outside the window. Chicago moved through its ordinary Thursday night, loud and bright and entirely itself. And inside a small apartment on a regular street, a waitress who was also a designer and a billionaire who remembered being poor sat across a kitchen table and began the patient and promising work of learning each other completely. It was not a perfect beginning, but it was a true one. And for Jessica Carter, who had spent years making do with what was available, true was the only kind of beginning she had ever really wanted.